Hey guys, Nate Bailey here, Life Outdoors, setting up my bear tent. It's going to be a wet and cold one this year, so I wanted to make sure that my wood stove was going to work and all my seams were sealed and everything was going to work. So as I was setting this up, I realized how dangerous it actually can be out there. The snowstorms and stuff in the spring in that high country, we hunt some of the high country that we hunt is 6,000-7,000 feet, and there's going to be a lot of snow on. We're going to have to take snowshoes in. We're going to have everything on our back, and this is going to be our house, and that's a pretty dangerous thing, and that's a pretty scary thing if you really let yourself freak out about it. If you sit and think about all the things that could go wrong up in the backcountry, especially spraying bears, not so much elk hunting, but spraying bear hunting, elk hunting with a bow, but spraying bear hunting could be a real bugger because of all the things that I mentioned. So I thought I'd come on here and talk a little bit about this idol that I think us as the church, as Christ people have made. We've made an idol about being safe. We've been through some traumatic things these last 3 years. We had COVID come on, and trying to be safe through that. Some people sat there and thought about what could so much that we even stopped some meeting together as the church, and we let the safety part of things probably overweigh just about everything else that we were thinking. And rightfully so. There's people that couldn't really go to some of those places. They would have been really jeopardized if they did get COVID. So I understand that. The one thing I didn't understand about any of that is how we didn't make it to where it was a personal decision on the person, where they could decide to go or not. And then coming down the road, then it was mask, right? You were safe if you had a mask on, or you're safe if you had a certain mask on, and we made an idol out of that as well. We would see our friends in town at the store, and one of them wouldn't be wearing a mask, and they get chastised. I didn't wear a mask anywhere. I tried not to wear a mask anywhere unless it was really, like the store would get fined for it, and then I would wear a mask. But it was amazing because we really didn't think far enough ahead, because those masks were something that we found out weren't all that effective. If anything, they were probably effective of keeping us from getting trace amounts and building up an immunity to it. That's just my personal opinion. A lot of people would disagree. And then we got all worried about the vaccine, right? And there were people at my church that I was going to that were on me. I said, I'm not getting the vaccine, and I told my reasons why. And people were just railing on me not getting the vaccine. They thought, how can you be a good Christian if you didn't get the vaccine? How can you be a good Christian if you didn't take these things into account? And I did. I probably did more research than anybody else, because I had to write a religious exemption for the Air Guard. I eventually did take the vaccine, just so you guys know. When the Norvac came out, it didn't scare me at all to take that, because it was just a normal vaccine and they injected COVID into you. And I already had COVID, so I wasn't too worried about it, and it didn't really affect me at all. But I was not going to take the mRNA, and probably the biggest reason is how much the Guard was pushing it on me, and how much people were pushing it on me, and how much the government was pushing it. It was a scary thing to have that much interest on the government telling you that you had to do this. So through all this, I see the ideas of the church change, where they were listening to more scientists that we now know. And at the time I was telling them the same thing. You got to concentrate on the stuff. Just look at the stuff and start praying through the stuff and understand what it's all about. Well, we're moving so far now that people were quoting to me that they just wanted to be good citizens, that they just wanted to follow the science. And I'm thinking to myself, man, being a good citizen, the Bible says so. It doesn't say to stop worshiping God over it, and it doesn't say to make it to where it's this not meeting together, this non-fellowship over it. And another thing that the Bible tells us is, we're supposed to listen to people in government. It says that in Romans, but it says that we're supposed to listen to God first. And some of the stuff that the government was asking us to do is not of God. So those are the reasons that we have made this idol out of being safe. Now we look at things and we're thinking about the world that we're living in, where you can't speak up as a Christian and you can't say things because you can't talk against transgenderism. You can't talk against Black Lives Matter. You can't say the right things. And see, this is where it's becoming a real problem. And I think it's been something that has been pushed through this secession. If they would have came out and told us that you can't say anything about transgenderism before they put all this other stuff on us and made us worry about safety and worry about losing, maybe a nonprofit status or losing all these things or losing sales if you're a company. If they hadn't done that, we probably would say, no, you can't tell me not to, we don't agree with that. That's something we don't agree with. But it's like the frog in the pot. If you take a pot of water and turn it on and get it boiling and throw a frog in it, it'll jump out every time. It won't boil to death. But if you take a frog, put it in the pot, and then just slowly turn it up, you will kill that frog. He will die from getting boiled. So these are the things that I think are very important that we have to talk about as we're looking and going down the road, because we're living in a world, and this is not a thing like I'm super patriot American. We're living in a world where evil is running rampant, and you can't talk about it without being chastised. And that's going to get us eventually as Christians. That's going to get us killed, but we can't be that way. We have to speak out, and that's what I'm talking about today. We got to speak out. One of the things is safety is a thing that keeps you from doing what you're supposed to do. When you worry about safety too much, you won't do what you're supposed to do. And one of the things was when I was in the Coast Guard, I was on the surf boats in the Coast Guard. District 13 surf boats were kind of like that was the epitome of the Coast Guard. If you're going to be a surf and rescue person in the Coast Guard, that was what everybody was aspiring to be. And I was able to make it to District 13, and I was an engineer and a crewman on the small boat on the 44-footer. One of the things you have to do to be a crewman on one of those is you have to go through what they call a surf swim every year. And what they do is they just throw you off and tell you to make it to shore in the surf in a real rough weather day. Now, it's hilarious when you think about it. You go out there, you're cold. The first time I did it was probably the scariest. It's cold already. It's raining. You're already soaked. I don't care what kind of immersion suit you have on, unless you have a dry suit, which none of us ran with dry suits back in those days. You're still wet underneath your immersion suit. And they get you out there and you're watching these breakers break. If you guys ever been to the Oregon coast and on a good windy day, just picture that, how they're coming across and the waves start to curl over, and as they curl over, the wind's blowing the top of them back, and it's got that spray coming back, and they're running you out there, and there's about 5 of you, and you get down in the well deck and they turn you sideways and start slopping you in, and they tell you to jump. It's not very safe. Quite honestly, it's not very safe. Of course, we've had a lot of training before that, and we had people out there, but they're trying to prepare us for something. And if they didn't do this, if they were like, "Oh man, that's too dangerous. We can't do that to those guys," then we would never know what it's like. There's 2 reasons that they do that to you in the Coast Guard. The first thing is you have to pass it. You got to swim to the beach through the surf. Sometimes that's 10, 12 foot of surf with no surfboard. You do have an immersion suit, but man, you still get pummeled. and you gotta make it in. And if you don't, then you're not going to get qualified to be on a surf boat, because you're not going to be able to carry out what you have to do. So the safe way is not the way. And then the second thing is, of course, is so you know what it's like when it really gets bad. And that's probably one of the bigger reasons that they do it. So you'd be swimming through, and I mean, it's probably a good 300 yards, and you're through 3 or 4 sets of big waves before you could get to where you could stand up. And it usually we had to end up saving a couple of our own guys or gals because they couldn't make it through. And so they would wash out. And that's one of the things that, it's a risk. It's a risk that we have to do. And that's what the Lord has told us about our lives. So when you give your life to Christ, that's what you've joined. You've joined into something like the Coast Guard. You're rescuing people. That's your whole job here on earth. And for you to take the safe road or to follow what the government says is not the way that God says to do things. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not saying go out and revolt. What I'm saying is you listen to what the government or whatever the powers to be tell you as a Christian, and then you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's well within Christendom. Or if it's not, you say, well, I have to do what God says. And that's one of the reasons that God tells us. He tells us to, in Luke 23, he says, if you come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. In other words, you're giving your life up. If you are giving your life to Christ, that's what you're doing. And safety is no longer a thing. I'm telling you right now, Christians are not safe. Jesus himself was not safe on this earth. In a broken world, you will not be safe if you're following Christ. And then he continues, verse 24, for whoever would save his life will lose it. But whoever loses a life for my sake will save it. Verse 25, for what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world, or his church, or a congregation, or his non-profit status, or whatever? Because it's going to come, guys. They're going to come to churches. There's going to be people that are transgendered that want to get married in churches, and they're going to sue the church if they're not allowed to. And the church leadership is going to have a hard problem with this. And I'm telling you, not everybody, not every church, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a stress. So we have to get ourselves ready for it. So you'll lose everything following Christ. You do. Some friends, you come to Christ, and the first thing that I lost were people that I shouldn't be around. Money's the next thing that you're going to lose. Followers on YouTube and Instagram, you get shadow banned. If you talk about Christ, the stuff just doesn't get shown. It just doesn't get shown. And why is this? Why is it not safe? It's because we're at war. We're at war that creates all other wars. You hear this put out there a lot. That people, matter of fact, in Christendom are like, well, we shouldn't do anything because, quite honestly, we're at war with spiritual forces, and they're exactly right. So they're like, we shouldn't do anything we should just pray. And not just pray. Praying is the most important thing you can do, and that's the first thing and the biggest thing. But also, they're leaving out so much about that. Let me read what they would quote to you. Ephesians 6. Put on the full armor of God so that you'll be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. Now check this out. This is talking about several different things here. Yes, it is talking about the internal battle between your spirit and the devil. Yes, it is very much talking about that. But another thing that it's talking about, and I want to point this out, is those schemes of the devil, because they are in the spiritual world, that slaps over into the physical world, and we do have a job here. Now, I'm not saying we take up arms and go shoot every evil person. That's not what I'm saying. Sometimes we have to take up arms to defend against evil people, but what I am saying is we have to fight. And we have to be able to articulate. We have to be able to speak. We have to be able to understand that we are fighting against spirits in people. That when we talk to people, that they're coming from a spiritual point that slops over into the physical. All those things that we have to take into account. And it says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers." Now, it does not say that the flesh and blood isn't a part of that battle. It doesn't ever say that in here. It doesn't ever say that we're not supposed to try to fight on this world, in the world itself. It's not like we wait to heaven to get and go fighting. That's not what it's saying here. It's saying, look, we need to understand where this is coming from, and we need to be able to speak against that and fight against that. Second thing, or verse 12. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers and against the powers and against the world forces of darkness, against the spiritual forces and the wickedness in heavenly places. And those things, you guys, are what we're fighting. If you don't think that that's what we're fighting against with transgenderism and gay, LGBT and all the pride stuff, that's coming from that place. That says that we're supposed to struggle against that. We're supposed to fight it. We're not supposed to sit back and go, oh, we're not doing anything with this because, it's the safe thing to do. So prepare. Luke 21:34 says, but watch yourselves, lest your heart be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and cares of this life. See that? Cares of this life. Don't let yourself be weighed down with cares of this life, like a trap. For I will come upon who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake in these times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things, and that all these things are going to take place, and and you're going to stand before the Son of God. So you have to understand that you are going to be talking to the Son of God. You're going to have to answer for this. Remember the churches in Revelation? They had to answer for how they were acting. They had to answer for how they engaged with the sinful matrix of this world. They didn't just, you're not supposed to stand back from it. He says, don't fear. God says, don't be afraid. Probably more than anything else he says in the Bible, he says, don't be afraid. And that's not what he's not talking about, like, don't be afraid of crossing a water. He's talking about don't be afraid of the evil, to stand against it, to fight it. So how does this look practically? How do we do this? That's the big deal, right? Well, take care of yourself physically. First of all, take care of yourself physically so you can. So you can do the things that you're going to need to do. It may get down to the point where you're not going to be able to eat as much as you used to be able to eat because of this. It's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming. And so make sure that you're in good physical condition. Make sure that you can carry out what God is having you to do. Get prepared mentally. Become strong. Do hard things. Get out here. Go bear hunting in the snow, in the rain, in the nastiness. Go out and do those hard things. And then most importantly, take care of yourself spiritually. Get prepared spiritually. Start reading your Bible, really understanding what it says, and then understand how you're dealing in that spiritual world. So when you're fighting this, when you're talking to people, when you're creating, when you're telling people about the hope that lives within you, understand that you're doing that among spirits. That this is not just something that we should let our emotions get totally involved with, but we should understand that these are hard things. And all these things, you guys, these three things, start doing it. I don't know what it's going to take for you. Maybe it's not to go out and go bear hunting in the snow and the nastiness, but you do have something to do. So with that, I just want to kind of get you primed up. That's the biggest reason I hunt a lot of times, is because I want to put myself in hard situations. And if we do that, then we're going to be spiritually, mentally, and physically toughened. I don't want to say completely fit, but tough. We want to be able to withstand. And that's what God says to do, is he says we're going to have to be able to withstand and share his word. Now, when I'm talking about a stand here, I'm talking about a spiritual stand. I'm not necessarily talking about a fight against people. I'm talking about we have to come against what the devil's doing. And that will sometimes bring fights among people, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to bring people to Christ. Hope that helps. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for jumping along here.